So this story starts when I saw this model on Thingiverse, and I just had to do an ice wall for her to hang off. So this particular Lara Croft is taken from Rise of the Tomb Raider, where she's climbing an ice wall in Siberia. As you can see, it's fairly well signposted you have to climb it, and there's plenty of rocks and icicles around. So the first thing I needed to do was print Lara, and I did that on my new Elegoo Mars 3. I've actually had it for a few months. Elegoo sent it me. It's been a beautiful little printer and a great replacement to my existing Mars. I love it, and I'm printing clear, so it's not that easy to actually see sometimes what's happening, but Anycubic clear with about 10% Ceratec tenacious to give it a bit of flex for when you drop it. So the first thing I did was take off all the obvious supports and then mount her and spray some primer so I could actually see the details a bit better. So with the primer on, I could see what I needed to clean. It's in 3 parts. I removed any support, and I'd probably over supported this a little, from any key areas, and then I used a metal file to just clean up any nubs that still remained. I used super glue to glue the 3 parts together and then carried on the cleanup. There's a slight gap where the 2 body pieces meet, so I used Tamiya basic putty to fill that, waited for it to set and then filed it back to shape. This is quite a detailed sculpt, so I spent a lot of time on this phase. And when I was happy, I primed her in Mr. Surfacer 1500 brown through my airbrush, and then I started on the base colours. Now, one very handy tip when you're painting Lara Croft: if you're doing her from the last 3 games, the reboots, then there's a gear up guide for all of her equipment and outfits, and you can use those to get the right colours. And that's what I did here. I basically matched the colours. I tried using the actual ice wall footage, but it was all colour graded and very dark. I mean, the lightest white of the snow was still a grey, a bluey grey. So I went back to the original colours, and I will add my own colour grade when I do the photos later. I did find this a bit shiny though. I think I'd shaken it well, but it obviously wasn't. And my highest highlights on this are definitely quite mid-tones. She's not very, very contrasty in the way I've painted her. And if you're interested in that, I did a whole video on it. I did the eyes with a cocktail stick and then used a Molotow chrome pen to add some silver highlighting on the ice axis. Then it was time to add some washes, and for this I used oil washes. If you put them on a piece of cardboard, the oil wicks out and they dry much quicker, but you can use a hairdryer to speed it along. I really only added some shadows into the creases in browns and blacks, depending what I was painting. And then she was still a bit glossy, so I matte varnished her, and she was done. And then I spent a long time thinking how to do the ice wall, because my 3D printer wasn't quite big enough for what I wanted to do. But I put it into Blender, I sculpted an ice wall and the rocks and all of these icicles. And I still didn't quite know how to print it because it was too big. And then my rescuer came. Elegoo offered to send me a Neptune 3 Plus. Brand new printer, absolutely gorgeous prints. I've been really impressed. This is a clear filament. I do love using it for ice. It comes out so well with the translucence. It's not clear, but it's great for ice. But with big printers come big print times. This is a big print, and it took just shy of 100 hours. That's 4 days of printing, over 4 days of printing. It was practically the first thing I'd ever printed on this printer, and you can see, beautiful as it is, I changed the filament halfway through. I ran out. I thought it was the same brand. It's not quite the same colour though, is it? Well, I'm not reprinting it now. But just look how it shimmers, how it captures the light, how it moves. Oh, it's beautiful. Sadly, the first filament was a little bit stringy. So I scraped those off with a round edge scalpel blade, and then I wanted to get rid of the layer lines. You can't really see them, but I'm worried when I put the translucent paint on in a minute, it will sit in those lines and really highlight them. So I went over everything with a coat of UV resin, just clear, just to fill in those layer lines. I just used cotton buds to smooth it out, let it flow and run everywhere, and then set it up. A torch wasn't quite strong enough, so I ended up using my UV curing chamber. As excited as I am about this wall, it isn't really the right colour yet. So I mixed up a custom colour using the screenshots to get most of the way there and painted it on. Now I used Tamiya clear colours and I thinned them with their X20 thinner, but they beaded on the surface and I spent hours painting them smooth as they dried so they wouldn't go all blobby. You can see though what one light tone does to turning this from a bit too cream to almost the right colour. But I still wanted to build up darker amounts, especially around the base of the icicles and on the ice wall itself. So I kept adding thin layers until I started to get what I wanted. But I wasn't quite sure about the texture of it. So I tried some white paint highlights just squiggled all over the main ice wall and around the base of some of the icicles. I'm not sure I should have done this. I think I should have left it. So let me know what you think in the comments. One of the problems was this paint came off when the next layer of the Tamiya clear went over the top. But I did need to paint my rocks, and these areas are done in 3 colours of life colour. It's kind of a raw umberish kind of brown, a warmer brown, and then a grey over the top, just dry brushed on to give some variety to the rock faces. To bed down that white paint, and because I felt that the ice face was just a little too bright, I went over it with another thin layer of Tamiya clear colours. This is quite dulled down, it's not too bright a blue, it's less bright than the first layer. Time to add snow. Now the first attempt didn't work. I used clear PVA glue and white powder snow and it just didn't work. I couldn't sprinkle it well enough. It just looked wrong. So I soon aborted on that idea and moved to plan B. This used the same clear PVA glue but a more granular snow. Now the only problem is it doesn't look fine enough. But I'm actually not putting a lot of snow in these areas. I used it more to cover up some of the areas where the brown paint had actually worn off when I'd applied the Tamiya gloss colours over the surface. And I bedded in the gap between the ice wall and the rock using it as well. Lara also needed the fine snow, but I was having the same problem getting the fine snow to stick well to her and look reasonable. So what I did in the end was put on a coarse layer of the snow and let it dry overnight. The next morning I went back and added the fine snow over the top and it stuck well. And to glue it I just used dilute isopropyl alcohol, about 1/3 isopropyl alcohol with water in a fine spray bottle. And when she was dry, Lara was done. But time just to look at that ice wall again. I felt the snow hadn't really landed as well as I liked, but I solved that with a thick coat of Tamiya clear. This is a great paint for going over glossy items. It's got a bit of body to it, unlike most gloss acrylic varnishes. All I had to do then was put Lara in place, a few spots of super glue secured her, and I turned her the right way up. If you enjoyed this Tomb Raider, then remember, I've got 3 other videos of dioramas that you might also like. So a huge shout out to my patrons and channel members who support me. And for the rest of you, if you want to subscribe, hit the bell button. You'll know when the next video comes up. And there's big news coming soon. See you next time.